You might have seen many disastrous events like earthquakes, fire outbreaks, pandemic, accidents and dangerous diseases killing thousands of people, yet many are surviving it. In our today's video in GB Log, we are going to present to you the top 10 most insane things humans has really survived in world history. Keep watching till the end, there will be a giveaway. A man with half face. The man in this picture is Billy Owen. I started seeing things in a new light back in February 2009, Billy Owen said. Losing your entire right eyeball will do that to you. Back then, Owen was a successful motorcycle mechanic with a loving wife and a 6-month-old son. But nagging sinus issues changed his life. I had headaches and I couldn't breathe because my right nostril was totally plugged, he told the Huffington Post. Doctors gave me decongestants thinking it was sinusitis, but my wife finally pushed me to see a specialist. On February 13, 2009, the doctor gave him the news: he had sinonasal undifferentiated carcinoma, SNUC, a rare form of cancer affecting the nasal cavity that had only a 10% survival rate. Most of the survivors have tumors removed at the early stage, Owen said, but, in his case, the cancer has spread so extensively that doctors had to remove half his face, including his right eye, the muscles, and nerves. I have very little sense of smell left, he admitted. If it's a real strong smell, I can pick it up. Now there's a giant hole where Owen's right eye used to be. When he removes a dental plate, he can stick his finger in that eye and have it come out his mouth. Having major surgery would change anyone, but Owen likes to think it changed him for the better. I was living a wild and crazy life beforehand, a lot of drinking, he said. But after my surgery, I was having a hard time in the hospital, going through a rampage, and I felt something rubbing my hand, like the presence of God. I felt a sense of peace, like everything was going to be okay. Owen looked at his son and decided to do everything he could to be around for him and his wife. A man stacked inside his car by ice. Another person is a Swedish man named Peter Skylberg, survived one of the insane thing. He stuck up in car covered with ice for 2 whole months, from December 19th, with minus 30 degrees Celsius temperature. The case of Peter Skylberg is so extraordinary, doctors and medical experts are still trying to establish exactly how the 44-year-old man survived in such extreme circumstances. No one knows how he had survived this without food for this long. His food was ice. Some scientists said it's igloo effect, but the most credible theory is hibernation, which is the process in which a living being slows down his metabolism to survive long. But it is not possible for a human being to hibernate. This process is used by bears. A lady frozen by ice. In 1999, Bacon Holm was on a skiing trip with her friends along a trail in Narvik, Norway, as was her daily routine after work, but the accident she faced a few minutes later was terrifying and nearly unsurvivable. While attempting to maneuver around a nearly frozen waterfall, she fell headfirst into a hole in the ice and got stuck with only her feet protruding from the water. Her friends attempted to help her out of the hole, but the ice-cold stream took her even deeper into the freezing ice. Because of that, her friends decided to call an emergency rescue team on their phone. But one way or another, she was able to last a full 40 minutes inside after finding an air pocket between the water and the ice. By the time the rescue team assisted her out of the stream, she had been submerged for 80 minutes total. Bacon Holm's temperature had dropped down to what was at the time the lowest recorded, about 56.6 degrees, Fahrenheit and 13.7 degrees Celsius, her pupils were dilated, and her heart had stopped beating. The emergency team tried to give her CPR, but they failed. For a short time, she was dead. A helicopter took her to a hospital. When she arrived, she was hooked into a bypass machine. The team would try to warm up her blood until she regained her pulse and her body temperature went back to normal. The plan was successful, and she survived. Over 100 doctors and nurses had assisted in bringing Bacon Holm back to life. Dr. Mads Gilbert, an anesthesiologist who worked at the hospital, believed the sub-zero temperatures actually helped. To quote, "Her body had time to cool down completely before the heart stopped. Her brain was so cold when the heart stopped that the brain cells needed very little oxygen, so the brain could survive for quite a prolonged time. Fortunately, she suffered no visible brain damage. But she had to pay a price for surviving that accident. The damage it did to her nerves made it more difficult for her to use her hands when it came to writing and cooking, for example. At least she was still able to go skiing. Anyone will just wish they could survive the cold like she could. Well, don't we all? You can answer that question in the comment box. Sir Ernest Shackleton and his team. We have a lot of lucky people so far, surviving free falls, crawling through a desert for 9 days and whatnot. But how about camping stranded on Antarctic ice for 3 years? 28 participants of the ill-fated Imperial Trans-Antarctic expedition led by Sir Ernest Shackleton had to rely on much more than luck if they wanted to survive in the barren wilderness, cut off from the world for several polar winters with nothing more than scarce provisions. After their ship Endurance got stuck in the ice, the expedition was all but left for dead. Things went from bad to worse when the pressure of ice floes crushed the ship, forcing the explorers to abandon their already frugal shelter and camp on ice. In their tents on ice, they survived harrowing months of extreme cold and high winds, low on food and other supplies. They could only hope that the currents of the ocean would guide their ice floe to an area from which they could risk escaping in their 3 lifeboats. The ice floe drifted northwards and started cracking under their tents. Before they could fall through the unstable ice during their sleep, they embarked on a daring escape across the extreme polar ocean in their lifeboats. They rowed for a week, soaked in icy water, paralyzed in -30 degrees Celsius temperatures, blistered from their efforts. After changing their destination several times, they managed to land on the shores of just barely more hospitable and equally uninhabited Elephant Island, still far away from any possible help. When it became clear that their daring escape from Antarctic ice was not enough to ensure their safety, Shackleton started planning an even more perilous journey across the polar oceans. With a party of 6 in a small lifeboat, they managed to navigate 1,300 kilometers of the polar ocean and by some miracle hit the shores of South Georgia Island. Other 22 members of the expedition were left behind and instructed to wait for a rescue party, without a chance to even know if Shackleton would be able to get help. South Georgia hosted a whaling outpost, which was of course located on the other side of the island. With their boat in shambles, Shackleton led a 3-man expedition across the island's mountainous interior. After years of struggling on the Antarctic ice, malnourished and exhausted, beaten by their last boat journey, they climbed day and night through snow between the 2,000 meters high mountains, and eventually reached the whaling outpost. Boys trapped in a cave by flood. After soccer practice in June 2018, 12 members of a Thai soccer team and their coach decided to explore the nearby Tom Luang Cave, one among Thailand's longest cave. The boys, aged 11 to 16 and their coach, 25, waded into the waters and commenced exploring the cave. When a flash flood came, they pushed deeper in, eventually making their thanks to an elevated platform, 4 kilometers into the cave system. The flood filled the twisted cave system with water, trapping the boys for 17 days. For the primary 9 days, that they had no food, and relied on dripping stalactites for water. But they didn't sit and wait. Realizing they were trapped, the boys took turns digging a 16-foot hole into the cave wall, hoping to seek out how out. They meditated to save lots of energy and avoid brooding about a foot. Then British divers who had begun from the cave's entrance 3 hours prior happened upon the boys. Surviving that long was only half the battle though. Thai Navy SEALs entered the cave to assist and hang with the boys as rescuers planned a way to extricate them safely. Over the course of a 3-day mission, divers retrieved each player and their coach. The arduous journey to the surface required each boy to wear a full-face diving mask, be tethered between 2 divers, and swim for hours through turns and exceedingly tight squeezes. Because of the efforts of Thai Navy SEALs and therefore the international dive community, all survived and were ready to quickly return to a traditional, healthy, life after the rescue. Tragically, one former Thai Navy SEAL died within the rescue effort. The incredible rail worker. Another unbelievable survivor is Phineas Gage. He was a 25-year-old railroad worker in mid-19th century Vermont, USA, where he was directing his gang in gang blasting rock to prepare a rock bed for the railroad. In the process of gang blasting, a big hole is dug into the rock and filled with gunpowder and fit in with a tamping iron along with a fuse. While taking care of the work, something caught his attention behind his back and he turned back and leaned over the blast hole. This is a blast hole and in a way, it makes Earth technically act as a gun. Unfortunately, Gage wasn't given a gun safety. So, as he leaned behind to speak something to his team of workers and before the words could be uttered, the blast hole went off and sent the tamping rod as a bullet flying outwards. It entered his cheeks and went through his brain and landed 80 feet away, smeared with his blood and brain matter. Just for context, this dude had a rod with the specification of 1-1/4 inches, 32 millimeters, in diameter, 3 feet 7 inches, 1.1 m, long, and weighing 13-1/4 pounds, 6.0 kilograms. Shoot through his skull. In a miraculous turn of events, rather than dropping dead, Gage survived. After a brief period of convulsions after falling on his back, he was able to get up, speak, and walk with little assistance. He was taken to the physician Edward Williams for his treatment where, as per the account of Williams, he recognized him and told him the story, said that he hoped he wasn't very badly hurt. That is the level of optimism I would want to inculcate in my life. He was conscious all along but tired from the blood loss. He stunningly made a close to full recovery in the upcoming months. He was a miracle in the field of medicine and was studied closely by a range of people including a professor at Harvard Medical School. Although most of the recovery seemed to be physical, as per his friends and family, his personality changed totally. He went apparently from a model citizen to a quote fitful, irreverent, capricious, and vacillating citizen unquote. So basically, losing his bits of mind made him lose his mind. Although he did get mellow over the years apparently. After the incident, he was fired from the job as a railroad worker due to his transformation from hard-working, responsible, and a great favorite with the men in his charge to a short-tempered drunkard with little to no regards for human life. He went on working a range of odd jobs to support himself. For a brief period of time, He worked in Barnum's American Museum where he was an exhibit, narrating his tale to the audience. He carried the rod with him most of the time and in his words referred to it as my iron bar, which was to be his constant companion during the rest of his life. Finally, after 12 years of living in borrowed time, his brain caught up with the fact that it's supposed to be dead, and finally Phineas Gage died after having a seizure. His body after death was given by his mother to be studied in the name of science to John Martin Harlow. After all the observations and studies, the skull along with the rod has been placed in Warren Museum, where they remain on display even till today. A man without brain. Carlos Rodriguez is a man without a brain. From birth, this guy was completely normal and nothing on the physical indicators was radically different from peers. As a teenager, Carlos contacted a bad company and started using alcohol and drugs. The tragedy that changed his life occurred when he was 14 years old. Being in a state of alcohol and drug intoxication, Carlos stole a car and got into an accident. During the collision, the teenager flew through the windshield and hit his head on the asphalt. The doctors managed to save his life, but a significant fragment of the skull and brain had to be removed. Brain injuries are not always deadly. A noteworthy fact is that after all operations and period of rehabilitation, the patient, who had lost much of the brain, did not change at all. He retained all the memories and mental abilities. Despite the fact that Carlos Rodriguez is a man without a brain, he clearly demonstrates the photo in the article. He continues to smile, is able to support conversation on various topics, quickly and appropriately answers the questions posed. Scientists today do not have a precise explanation of how one can live without the brain and retain most of the mental functions. A popular hypothesis in the scientific community is that the nerve endings in the abdominal part are partially replaced by the traditional organ of thinking. The man that survived HIV. A man survived HIV along with leukemia. He is the first and the only man, till now, to be cured of HIV. His name is Timothy Ray Brown, more commonly known as the Berlin patient. Timothy Ray Brown was born in Seattle, Washington. He was diagnosed with HIV in 1995 when he was in Berlin doing his studies. After controlling the virus for many years with antiretroviral therapy, ART, Brown was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia, AML. He underwent chemotherapy but it failed to eradicate the cancer. In 2007 he underwent bone marrow stem cell transplantation from a donor who had the mutated CCR5DELTA32 gene. If a person has one pair of the mutated gene then it can resist the HIV, but if a person has two pairs of the gene then it is immune to HIV. 1% of Caucasian and less than 1% of the other people have this mutation. He underwent the transplant with complications. After the first transplant he stopped his ART medications. Though his HIV did not return, his leukemia came back and he had to undergo second transplant from the same donor. Even after 10 years of repeatedly testing his blood, immune cells, gut tissue, and everywhere else they could manage to look, researchers have not been able to detect replication-competent HIV anywhere in Brown's body. This itself is a miracle, since 50% of stem cell transplant patient leads to death, and he was reluctant to undergo the transplant. Though some debate still exists about the kind of cure he underwent, whether there is no trace of the virus in his body, a sterilizing cure, or whether he simply no longer needs treatment, a functional cure. According to UNAIDS, there were approximately 36.7 million people worldwide living with HIV/AIDS at the end of 2016. Out of 70 million HIV cases known, only one person is known to be cured of HIV. Researchers are still trying to find answers which led to his cure. but he sure paved the way for finding a cure to the epidemic. The man that performed his appendix surgery himself. In February 1961, a new Soviet station Novolazarevskaya was opened in Antarctica. Among the team members of the first wintering was Dr. Leonid Rogozov. In April 1961, Rogozov became seriously ill. At first he felt weakness and fatigue, then, a sharp pain in the right side of the abdomen. He knew it was appendicitis. There was no other doctor in the team. Traveling from Antarctica to USSR would take 36 days by sea, and the flight was not possible due to strong winds. It was a surgery that he had performed before, but this time he was far from civilization, in the middle of a polar desert. Rogozov knew that the appendix could break during the surgery, and it would kill him. He needed to open his abdominal cavity, then pull out his intestines. He did not know whether this could be done in principle. His condition worsened, and the pain intensified. Rogozov decided to operate. The management of the polar station asked and received permission for the surgery from Moscow. This is an excerpt from Rogozov's diary. I worked without gloves. It was hard to see. The mirror helps, but it also hinders after all, it's showing things backwards. I work mainly by touch. The bleeding is quite heavy, but I take my time. I try to work surely. Opening the peritoneum, I injured the blind gut and had to sew it up. Suddenly it flashed through my mind, there are more injuries here and I didn't notice them. I grow weaker and weaker, my head starts to spin. Every 4 to 5 minutes I rest for 20 to 25 seconds. Finally, here it is, the cursed appendage. With horror I notice the dark stain at its base. That means just a day longer and it would have burst, and at the worst moment of removing the appendix I flagged. My heart seized up and noticeably slowed, my hands felt like rubber. Well, I thought, it's going to end badly. And all that was left was removing the appendix. And then I realized that, basically, I was already saved. The boy that survived fresh-eating bacteria. The award for the most insane thing a human has ever survived goes to Jake Finkbonner. On Saturday, February 11, 2006, while playing a basketball game at the Boys and Girls Club, 6-year-old Jake Finkbonner was pushed in the back and busted his lip on the base of a basketball hoop. Usually, a busted lip is no big deal. Except when the object the lip was busted on contains a necrotizing fasciitis bacteria, flesh-eating bacteria. Necrotizing fasciitis is a rare infection of the deeper layers of skin. It can be caused by many types of bacteria, which usually enter via an open wound, for example following surgery. Despite being known as a flesh-eating bug, the bacteria do not actually eat the tissue. They cause the destruction of skin and muscle by releasing toxins. Symptoms usually begin with patients complaining of intense pain in the area where the infection began. In the early stages, signs of inflammation may not appear. Redness and swollen or hot skin will show up quicker if the bacteria is closer to the surface of the skin. As the disease progresses, skin color may change to violet and blisters may form, with tissue then turning black as it dies. Patients with necrotizing fasciitis typically have a fever and appear very ill. Diarrhea and vomiting are also common symptoms. Mortality rates have been noted as high as 73% if left untreated. Once the disease is diagnosed, it is almost always necessary to cut away the infected tissue to stop it from spreading. The next day, Jake found himself fighting for his life at Seattle Children's Hospital. At this point, the disease's prowess was in full effect as doctors watched it in shock as it ate the flesh off Jake's body. It's like lighting one end of a parchment paper, Rubens told National Public Radio. And you just watch it spread from that corner very fast, and you're stamping it on one side, and it's flaming up on another. It's almost as if you could watch it moving in front of your eyes. It was at that moment, as Jake's survival was starting to look bleak, that doctors began telling his parents to prepare for the worst. Being Catholics, they called a priest to give Jake his last rites. Then something amazing happened. On Jake's 9th day in the hospital, he took a sudden turn for the better. The infection slowed down and eventually it stopped spreading. Being religious, Jake's parents called it an act of God. At that point, we were desperate, and we were looking for anyone's help that would help our son. We wanted Jake back with us desperately, he recalled. But we were willing to give him up to God. Nobody could blame them. For 2 weeks doctors kept Jake in a drug-induced coma while they tried unsuccessfully to stop the spread of bacteria. Now out of the blue he's healthy, and 8 weeks later he gets cleared to go home. Of course, while Jake's parents called his recovery a modern miracle, the doctors believed it had something to do with the exceptional medical and surgical attention he received, 29 surgeries, including facial reconstruction, to be exact. He was extremely fortunate to be in an outstanding hospital receiving outstanding medical treatment, said Dr. Stanford Schulman, Chief of Infectious Diseases at Children's Memorial Hospital in Chicago. Craig Rubens is an outstanding pediatric infectious disease specialist and an expert on group A strep infections. I think the fact that he was involved shows Jake really did get truly outstanding care. We doctors don't want to take hope away from patients and families, but I would feel comfortable attributing this child's remarkable recovery to outstanding surgical and medical care. Whether you believe in divine healing, medical science, or both, nobody can dispute that Jake Finkbonner is lucky to be alive. Which of these encounters do you think is the most terrible and insane? Please write your review in the comment box. Now time for the giveaway. Do you enjoy adventurous books and stories? Get them for free at no cost. Just go down to the video description and click on the link with title Amazon Audible, then sign up for free trial. Even if you have $0.00 in your credit card, you can also cancel it whenever you wish. The best part is that you don't need to stress yourself reading them because it will be played in audio form. One more thing, don't ever forget hit subscribe and bell icon. It encourages us you got value from our video.